All right, we've got some people trickling in here. Shall I get started?
I think so.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Now and There Asks conversation series. I'm Kate Gilbert. I use she, her as my pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director of Now and There. I'll be moderating our conversation today. Today is our 5th of 8 sessions of Now and There Asks, where we ask Boston communities the big question, what does your neighborhood need right now? Today's session brings us to Fields Corner, a neighborhood within Dorchester, and we are excited to have here with us local artist Tran Vu and Executive Director of Viet Aid, Lisette Lee. Before we formally begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I am standing here today in Westport, Mass, on a little vacation on the unceded land of the Wampanoag people. And as we talk about Dorchester, we must also acknowledge the Neponset tribe of the Massachusetts Nation, who originally inhabited the land of Dorchester. We acknowledge the Massachusetts and Neponset people, past, present, and future in this conversation. This program has been created to offer a supportive and proactive space for artists, cultural producers, community leaders, all of you, all of us, the public, in the face of physical distancing and public retreat. We aim to bring together all of you to open up a dialogue about what's happening right now in Boston's neighborhoods, to be better listeners and to encourage action. We'll start with a 30-minute conversation that I will moderate, followed by 30 minutes of community dialogue. Again, that means you guys. So as questions come up for you, if you want to say, hey, I see some people are introducing themselves, please use the chat function over here. And we remind you to set your setting to all attendees and panelists so we can actually see what you're saying. And as questions come up that you would like to bring to us, we hope you'll use the Q&A function at the bottom and come online and talk with all of us. So let's get started on this really tough question. What does Fields Corner need right now? And I'd like to introduce our guests. Tran Vu, born in Vietnam and raised in Dorchester and South Boston, identifies as a 1.5 generation Vietnamese American, which I'd like to get to, interdisciplinary and transnational artist whose socially engaged works draw from her experience as a community organizer, educator, and healer. She received her MA in Art and Politics from NYU and her BA in Ethics Studies and Visual Arts at Brown University. Tran was also one of NEFA's, we talk a lot about NEFA in this program, NEFA's Creative City Artist from 2017 to 18, a Live Arts Boston grantee in 2018, as well as another this year, congratulations, and a National Artist Strategist CCF Fellow in 2019. She's also been a Stable Ground Boston artist since 2018. Tran also works as at AIR, Association of Independents in Radio, where she advocates for independent producers in public media and mission-driven storytelling. Tran, I don't know when you sleep, but Lisette Lee has been the Executive Director of Viet Aid since January of 2018. Lisette graduated from Tufts with a bachelor's degree in American Studies and went on to work with the Chinese Progressive Association. She then worked with the Right to the City Alliance, and most recently at the Massachusetts voter table here in Boston. When asked about how she felt about joining Viet Aid at the beginning of 2018, she said, as a young Vietnamese American immigrant woman, I'm excited to be coming home to a community and organization. I think this question of home and what is it and how can we hang on to it is going to be part of our conversation here today. So Fields Corner has a very vibrant and strong Vietnamese population, and I think we can point to the work that Viet Aid has done over the past 26 years, from providing affordable quality housing to over 135 families and individuals, assisted 400 families through housing counseling programs, and certified well over 600 limited English proficient individuals in your 10-hour workshops. All of this has prevented cultural displacement and the rapid gentrification we're seeing across Boston. And this is going to be, I think, a lot of the thrust of our conversation here. But before we get into present day and what you guys are both doing to support your community, I think it's important to highlight the colonization ties of, Tran, you brought this up. We're here because you were there. So I'd love for maybe Lisette, for you to begin with, if you're willing, to share yours and your family stories and your relationship and connection to Fields Corner.
Yeah, so thanks, Kate, for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I think the idea of home, like you were saying, is something that's I think a lot about. My family and I'm also consider myself 1.5 generation. I came to the United States when I was 6. My father fought in the South Vietnam Army, and because of that, we came through to America under a program called HOP-O, HOP-O 2. And lived in Akron, Ohio for the first 8 years of my life, 8 years of our time in America. And, I think growing up in Ohio, there wasn't a large Vietnamese population. There wasn't a large Asian population. And so for most of the time that I was there and in school, I was often one of 2 Asians. I remember being in the 2nd grade and having just finished my ESL kind of class, and was asked to translate for a new student who was a Chinese immigrant, and distinctly remember saying, I don't know what he's saying. And so, I think growing up, I was keenly aware that my family was different, but didn't really understand what that meant until I came to college. And, at Tufts, taking American Studies, and then for the first time saw the intersection between my personal experience and systems and policy. And then was introduced to the Fields Corner community, and kind of realized that not growing up in an ethnic enclave, really kind of saw Fields Corner as a place of that's where my people are, right? I'm not bilingual in any stretch, but I feel a great affinity to Fields Corner. Because this idea of being displaced from Vietnam, going to a place like Akron, then moving to Arizona, then coming to Boston, always kind of searching for where's my cultural home, and that for the past couple years has been Fields Corner.
That must feel really good, but I imagine as a child, pretty unsettling. Tran, what was your experience, and how did you come to Fields Corner?
Yeah, hi everyone. Good being here. My pronoun is she, her, and I would say my story, there's definitely some parallels to Lisette. I identify as 1.5, and for those who, for people who don't know, that means that we were born in a different country, but that we came here when we were young, so that most our the majority of our childhood and kind of upbringing was in the U.S. So I was born in Vietnam, specifically Saigon, kind of now known as Ho Chi Minh City. And my family and I came to the U.S. in the early 90s, also through the HO, Humanitarian Operation Program. So for also people who don't know, is a program that was by the US government to support military families from the South Vietnamese Army who've been imprisoned in re-education camps after the war to come over to the US. So our families were part of that program, because there are different waves of the Vietnamese diaspora throughout the US and the world. And I would say our wave is kind of in the third wave of the military kind of families in the 90s. And so, yeah, I mean, the concept of home, diaspora, displacement, migration, all of that, I think, is really central in part of my identity, thinking around even my practice, and even thinking about my relationship to my community and Fields Corner specifically. So when my family and I first came to the US, we were actually supposed to go to California because of our refugee kind of location. We were working with the ICA, sorry, the IRC. And we were working with a family to go to California because at the last minute, something happened. So we didn't have a family that will help sponsor us. So my dad was like, let's just go to work. Okay, we're going to Boston somewhere, you know, heard there's good schools there. And so we ended up in Boston and we didn't know anyone. I think my dad later on found some military kind of friends and built a community there. But yeah, we came to kind of the East Coast where majority of kind of Vietnamese resettlement was actually in California and kind of warmer climate, which makes sense. And so, yeah, we ended up in the Boston area, specifically kind of in Neponset, kind of North Dorchester a little bit. And we stayed with a Polish family for a couple months. And then it kind of didn't work out just because, I mean, I can say part of it is also to, you know, some racism too. So we ended up moving into kind of Fields Corner area. And we stayed there for about a year or two. And then we ended up moving to South Boston with in the projects, the Old Colony project, because that was the only thing we can afford. And so I found myself, my family and I always, you know, coming back to Fields Corner for community, to go grocery shopping, to, you know, eat at the local restaurants, and to really connect with, you know, people that we have a stronger connection there. And then during my college years, my family moved back to Fields Corner again. This time they were able to buy a place. And so, you know, on and off, my relationship with Fields Corner has always been really central to both, you know, my work in the community, my connection to kind of my art practice, and really thinking around, you know, the work that's really needed right now.
And that work has continued into your art. I'm curious to know if art was part of this growing up experience, if it was something that you know, you hear stories about people who got through challenging times because of art. When did art and the sense of community that you build in your art start in your practice?
For me, at a really early age, specifically around art, like I knew that I was an artist actually in like kindergarten. I was always doing art, and it was something that, and I was just a lot of my you know, my art teachers always gave me a lot of compliments on, and I was just like, oh, okay. I mean, and then art was the only thing that I felt like when I was doing, I was so much in the zone, I didn't really think about anything else. And so I knew like early on it was a part of my calling. Like I knew whenever, even when I try not to do art, I always came back to it. And I remember specifically in the 4th grade, one of my art teacher was like, hey, you should, you know, take classes, maybe at the MFA or something, the Museum of Fine Arts. And I was like, well, I can't afford it. And then she was like, I think there's like some scholarships. So she ended up like helping me, and I was able to you know, get a scholarship to attend classes at the MFA when I was in like the 4th grade. And I just kind of continue a little bit on. And I would say, and then the other question around kind of community, that really came up for me in high school, especially around, you know, thinking around, you know, voter registration. I was kind of early on in high school involved with kind of youth kind of organizing, specifically with Asian American and at the time CAPE, Coalition for Asian American Youth at UMass Boston. So that they were really integral in, for me, thinking around the idea of community at an early age. And so kind of that two path of art and community, I always saw, you know, kind of those two paths kind of separately, because at the time, and this was, you know, in the 2000, I was like, I was trying to figure out, you know, kind of the path to take. And it wasn't until, you know, later on in college and so forth, thinking around how the two paths doesn't have to be mutually exclusive and really have to merge the two. And really, in a way, they're very much interconnected, and has always been in terms of, you know, creative placemaking, creative tending, just along the lines of that, and especially now, all the more prevalent.
Yeah, and we talked before about the use of representation in your work and the power of. It's hard to, you know, sometimes read something about, say, an immigration or migration story and understand the sheer numbers. So we've looked at the hats on your wall there before in a studio visit. Can you just also touch on, I've seen in your practice this marriage of how do you make an artwork, engage community in whatever sort of activity that is, being voter, but now you're starting to bring in healing into your work. And can you just touch on how you came to that, and is it art?
Do you mean like specifically like around healing, around the work of healing?
Yeah. So you just got another lab grant recently.
Yeah, with the live arts grants from the Boston Foundation. So the project that I started in 2018 was called Family Stories, Viet Aid, with translation of that. And the idea is to engage intergenerational community residents in Dorchester, specifically the Vietnamese community and household, to talk around really, issues that oftentimes we don't talk about even in our family. And so I wanted to really explore that in a kind of performances, because that's one of the ways to, I think, a lot of Vietnamese household, they really engage each other to music, we have like this big kind of variety show and called Paris by Night, which is super popular, and to really engage around just, sometimes narratives. And so I wanted to create kind of like a format that can bring in elders and also young people to talk about hard issues. And so we were, engaged kind of bilingually, both in using English and Vietnamese to make it more accessible for young people and elders to communicate and to really talk around, issues of, adaptation, cultural resiliency, even memories of the war, of really talking to families around hardship, around mental health. And so the idea of healing is really embedded in that, because oftentimes families don't even talk to each other. There's such, cultural barriers, even in terms of generation shifts, languages. And so I remember there's one performance where we had a local artist kind of came out on stage. Not at the time, he like came out to his mom before, but he was reenacting his kind of story of coming out, and also he was doing it in drag. And so I was really nervous about that, the kind of, more so conservative kind of community members reacting to that, but people who were really empathetic. There was tears. People, a lot of elders wanted to learn more, wanted to engage with him and how to kind of support. So I was really blown away by that reaction. So in that sense of healing, I mean, it's always been there, but thinking around ways that, our community, and so many, immigrant and refugees communities are, the healing of, of memories of, especially around migration, displacement, what does it mean to really share stories with each other and to kind of heal in that process of even communicating.
That's really important work. Thank you for making those spaces. It is the Vietnamese American community in Phil's Corner, and I just want to mention that this is only one part of the whole population of Phil's Corner, the three most popular spoken language, Vietnamese, Spanish, and English, and you guys are representing. And I appreciate the honesty of your stories. You're just representing your own lived experiences. I'd love, Lisette, to take it over to you and bring it to the current healing and the current needs that are still in Phil's Corner as a result of COVID, and maybe even stepping back to the systemic challenges of gentrification and the overwhelming number of families that are in units together. And hand it over to you to talk about your work and all of the many people that you're serving through Viet Aid.
Yeah, I think I often kind of say that like Vietnamese people, particularly Vietnamese women, are incredibly resilient. I grew up with my mom basically saying, listen, if we can get through war, we can get through anything. And it's something that kind of, I think, rings really true to the pandemic that we're in, and this kind of like framework of like we can get through this, and it's going to take certain things being in place, right? But it's our community is resilient. Our community is going to be okay at the end of this, and hopefully we are kind of changing things so that we can thrive. I think so. The Vietnamese community, just to take a little bit more of a step back, when it, like Tran said, the the first couple waves were really in like the West Coast. And then as folks were coming to places like Boston, kind of in the early 80s, it wasn't actually Phil's Corner. You know, folks began to settle in Boston, in like East Boston and Brighton. But because of the role that the Catholic Church played, and folks were kind of getting like priced out of Brighton, there was this like movement to kind of come to Phil's Corner, and that is now kind of where the Vietnamese community in New England calls home. But it wasn't like the original intention. But I think the role that the Catholic diocese play in resettlement, and access to transportation. So Phil's Corner is, I think some of the issues that we have seen over the past like 10 years is kind of a microcosm of what we are seeing across the city and across the country. Rising housing cost, and its effect on people's kind of ability to stay in Boston and in neighborhoods like Phil's Corner. Historic language barriers that make it really difficult for older adults to access public services, and kind of just cultural barriers, right? So when you come to the United States, as an adult, you come and you immediately try to make your life here, but it's not like people are teaching you what American society is like. And so all of those things existed before COVID, but what we've seen over the past like 4 months is kind of how a lot of these like issues have been exacerbated. People losing their not being able to work right now, and how that affects things like housing insecurity, food insecurity, restaurants, nail salons. Our community is working in the service industry and industries in which you can't work from home, right? And so you're not working, you're not working. It's not like, the privilege that I get to have, like being in my house, and still being able to pseudo operate. And our seniors are even more isolated because of the pandemic. And so Viet Aid is really trying to find ways to kind of fill the gap, and do it in a way that's culturally appropriate. So when we do meal deliveries to older adults, we make sure that we're delivering pho, or we're delivering gum, because that's what people want. We didn't want to deliver people food that wasn't a source of comfort. When we provide groceries, we try to make sure that it's a mix that includes like rice, includes like Asian greens. We don't want to waste food. We also want to make sure that people feel that they're respected when we are trying to seek out ways to support them.
And the numbers that you were giving me on Monday when we had our pre-call was something like 800, right? Bags of groceries.
Yeah.
A week? Yeah.
Yeah, the combination of like the work that we do with our partners in Not For Sale, in the Dorchester Mutual Aid, it comes out to about 800 groceries and or meals per week.
It's amazing. Tran, you're also involved in Not For Sale, as well as the Dorchester Community Care. Can you share what you're doing there?
Yeah, I mean, just as Lisette was talking about the delivery, currently at the moment, I'm helping out with some of the delivery, and it's just really just amazing seeing just how organized the team is, mostly of volunteers, and being able to see, people packing up the meals, even loading into like the truck, loading to cars, making sure, safety protocol is in place. And also, and for me, being able to like hand deliver it to like households, especially families in the area, all types of families, Vietnamese, non-Vietnamese. It's just really amazing, and seeing young people that are, connecting, elders too. And so just a little bit of background on Dorchester Not For Sale is a group of really local residents and an organization in the area coming together to organize residents around the displacement that's happening, the development, kind of gentrification. And so the group's been around for almost over 2 years now, and they started right after the Dot Block project, and then specifically around the Glover's Corner, kind of Glover's plan right now. And so because really organizing efforts, communication for the past 2 years, community dinners monthly up until recently around COVID, really looking at ways to organize efforts and to make sure that information are transmitted to local residents who are most will be affected by the displacement and already affected. And so making sure that languages are accessible, meeting times, making sure that people are informed, and really pushing against the city, against BPDA, and really holding their feet to the fire with some of to make sure that people who are most affected, really their voices are heard. And so really these efforts have just really made waves to so many other efforts, and now with around COVID, around really creating a Dorchester community care around delivering meals, really transforming organizing efforts into really serving the community at the time that they need it most, and thinking around supplies, thinking around information that's transmitted, just making sure that people are connected, which is so powerful in these times where people can be in isolation.
Yes, yes. If there is a silver lining to all of this, it is this mutual aid and community organizing that's coming about. And what you're talking about, Dorchester Not For Sale, is not just for the Vietnamese community. And Lisette, when I was on Viet Aid's website, when I first was sort of kicking around and looking at things, I was struck by the solidarity statement that you all put up in recognition of the Black and Brown communities that are within Fields Corner. And I want to lift up, there was a Vietnamese proverb that you had on the blog that said, "When one horse hurts, the entire stable will not eat the grass." We talked a bit about this proverb and the challenge of the sort of conservative media within the Vietnamese community. Can you give us a little bit more background on this statement and why it's so important to all of you?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to this conversation about what is home. Just to I wanted just to add something to what Tran was saying about Not For Sale, is when you ask Fields Corner residents, particularly people of color and low income folks, do you want to still be in Fields Corner? And it's part of a project that Viet Aid and 9 other organizations are engaging in right now. The answer is yes. We love our neighborhood, and we don't want to go, right? There are reasons why families are doubling and tripling up in units. It's because they don't want to leave Fields Corner, they don't want to leave the services, and they don't want to leave this the sense of community that we have built, and it just becomes really important, especially if you're coming from displacement. The idea of getting displaced again is heart-wrenching, right? And so I think that the proverb kind of connects to that, right? So Viet Aid, we are a Vietnamese leading organization, but we're not a Vietnamese exclusive organization. There are, our residents in the affordable housing units that we own and manage are mixed race. The folks who come into our older adult program are mixed race, as well as our preschool, and so the Black and Brown community is a part of the Viet Aid and Vietnamese community, and we in the statement is really hoping to kind of just say, we know that if one part of our community hurts, the entire community hurts, because as Vietnamese Americans, we can understand trauma. We may not understand the full experience of Black Americans in this country, but you know, it's that part of hurt. When you hurt, I hurt, and we can't separate in a neighborhood like Fields Corner. You know, I think there's definitely some healing that needs to happen. It's not perfect, but at the same time, like when you think about how we define home, we're all defining the same location as home.
It's beautiful. Tran, do you want the last word on this before we jump over to Q&A?
I feel like it's almost a lot to, I'm not sure where to start, but I mean, just to uplift and amplify, I think what Lisette said around, you know, working in solidarity with our community members, and, you know, specifically with Dorchester Not for Sale being very intergenerational, multicultural, multilingual. We really try to make sure that, you know, our meetings, our materials are accessible, to make sure that it really speaks to the community and people who are most vulnerable, and they you know, are the ones that are leading the community in our demands and our goals and objectives, and it really should be people's voices of the working class, people of color and community members. And the other thing, I mean, I think as with, you know, so many communities, there's, you know, a lot of history, a lot of, you know, complicated history too, a lot of internalized, you know, issues too, that oftentimes is really hard. I always think the hardest people to organize is your own community, because it's so personal, it's so many, you know, things that are there, and people almost know you too well. And they also, and also the concept, you know, insider and outsider, which I know, you know, Dorchester, Fields Corner community, there's a lot of people here with really great intention that, you know, sometimes doesn't always come out, you know, and the words and intention and action doesn't always match up. So I think a lot of that is really ongoing. And I think it makes for a very, you know, complex community, but at the same time, there's a lot of heart, a lot of, you know, great, you know, vision, and a lot of, you know, talent locally that I think really has to be recognized, spotlighted, and really amplified. You know?
I think that's really well said. It is a messy process, any kind of community organizing, and there's never a, you know, a right way, and certainly intentions and actions can get very, very confused. I'd love to talk about the move to rename Fields Corner, or to name, not to rename it, to Little Saigon and a cultural district, but maybe that will come up in the Q&A. I see some, it's been kind of quiet on the chat, so I hope there's some people that are willing to jump on with some questions now. I'm going to hand it over to Mary Liz to lead us through the always lively Q&A.
So folks, if you have any questions for either of the panelists, please do feel free to submit them through the Q&A function, and we'll bring you live online so we can hear your voice and add you to the conversation. But I think that while we wait to see questions that folks have, I would like to pick up with the cultural district and have, you know, both of you speak to that. I think I would also love to hear about how you're working with the other communities in Fields Corner on this initiative to rename it Little Saigon, and how you're intersecting with folks in the Black community, in the Spanish speaking community, which is a lot of Afro-Caribbean folks in Fields Corner. You know, how are you getting the whole community behind this idea, and what is the movement? Where are you in the process? So Tran, I can start with you and talk a little bit about how Dorchester Not for Sale is advocating for this, and how your work is supporting that. And then Lisette, I would love to hear from you about how lots of members of the community are being part of this process.
Yeah, I mean, at first I just want to kind of clarify, it's not to rename anything. It's, you know, like Little Saigon is the name that has been chosen for the cultural, you know, kind of like the cultural designation of the area. So it's really kind of like, you know, a long kind of ongoing process that's still happening, as in other community. I know in Roxbury, Nubian Square, kind of their cultural district, district naming, also JP too. So it's kind of part of that kind of effort that is very much tied to the city in terms of funding, in terms of kind of ongoing development of certain areas. So that's where kind of that process is rooted in. And I would say the process has been probably over a year now and ongoing. I've been kind of in and out of it, kind of to be transparent. I was in some of the discussion kind of early on. I know when there was a lot of groups coming together to kind of decide on naming, and then now I believe they're in the process of trying to put together a board of directors to continue kind of that ongoing. And I would say for the Vietnamese community, just even a lot of Vietnamese kind of communities throughout the U.S., there's always been, I think, voices in supporting of creating an area that is known as kind of Little Saigon. There has been, other areas, especially in California, Texas area too, with the name Little Saigon. And there's a lot of history to that. And I know Lisette can speak a little bit more to it too. I mean, it's, very rooted in Saigon in Vietnam, where I was born. And the very, the cultural and the memory of that, especially for the majority of the Vietnamese diaspora, coming from South Vietnam, very, with ties to Saigon as a country, as their homeland. And so I think and wanting that recognition, wanting that representation for Boston, for the state to know that there is a huge Vietnamese community in the Dorchester area, in Fields Corner, and to make sure that we have the funding support, to make sure that we bring more arts and cultural to the area, I think is really important. And I think for a lot of elders, oftentimes leaving their country and making sure that there's an area where they feel like there is a strong sense of connection, to be able to pass it on to the younger generation is definitely really, really important. And I think sometimes it can be tricky, because in Fields Corner there's so many groups here, so many immigrants, refugees, so many and the history of even kind of neighborhoods changing now. And I think people want to make sure that they're recognized. And I think oftentimes that can be a really tricky process, and especially with a lot of bureaucracy in place too, a lot of paperwork, making sure that people's voices are at the table. I think oftentimes that can get complicated, but I think it's also really exciting too to know that there is really a push to make sure that representation is here.
Great, Lisette.
Yeah, I also will be transparent and say that I've also have been in and out of the conversation. I did put a link to NOVA, and I saw that Annie Le is a participant, and she is the president of NOVA, and they've really been the ones leading the conversation and leading the organizing around the cultural designation. I think for Viet Aid, we support Little Saigon cultural designation because, we believe very much that for the Vietnamese community, Fields Corner is irreplaceable, and to us, it's essentially saying we wanna establish a cultural framework which allows us to fight for the preservation of Fields Corner as part of the Vietnamese American story. It's not to say that and I think also the conversations have been with leaders all across the Dorchester community, whether or not they're Asian American or white or Black, Cape Verdean, Spanish. So I think NOVA has done an incredible job to try to reach out and just to kind of talk about why it's so important to the neighborhood. And it's not a cultural designation of Little Saigon is not separate from any sort of cross-racial work that we would do in the neighborhood.
Well, thank you. I have one other question, and then we have some questions starting to come in from our participants, which is great. I think my last question is just about, and Lisette, I'll start with you. What have been your biggest challenges, either bureaucratically or community-wise, during this period of COVID, of keeping up the momentum on some of these organizing efforts, and how can people on the call help, support, get involved, call city councilors, whatever the call to action is that you think is would be really helpful to help you get through some of those challenges that you've been seeing at Viet Aid, or to lift up for other members of the community that you know are hurting?
Yeah, I think, we would always welcome volunteers to help us do wellness calls, to do census calls. We don't want to forget the importance of it being a census year, and kind of seeing our work as, 5 years down the line. We also want to make sure there's adequate funding for neighborhoods like ours. We welcome volunteers. There's no shortage of meals that need to get delivered, like I said, wellness calls and other. I think for us, I'm incredibly lucky to be working with a team of folks who are really dedicated and come in every day to pack food, to, do phone calls, to help folks with unemployment applications and things like that. But definitely capacity is a really big one, and funds so that we can continue to feed folks. We have been really fortunate to receive funding that we use to purchase PPE, to purchase groceries, and we, that support will help us to kind of sustain that, our efforts into the fall, which we anticipate it may be into the fall, if not longer. But I did just kind of want to talk about this collaboration called Crossroads that Viet Aid is part of. It is with the Boys and Girls Club of Dorchester, Dot House Health, the Louis D. Brown Institute, MASHCOSH, which is the Massachusetts Coalition for Occupational Safety, New England United for Justice, the Asian American Resource Workshop, and the Dorchester Youth Collaborative, and the All Dorchester Leadership in ADSL. I'm so sorry if Candace is on the call and I just butchered your acronym. And so it's this interracial coalition that comes together just to really ask the question, like, what do, Phil's Corner is at, thanks, Jackie. Phil's Corner is at a crossroads, right? We can either come together and support the community and really find ways to work more collaboratively, to really kind of think about the neighborhood outside of silos, or the community will continue to, potentially be affected by displacement. And so for folks who live in Dorchester, live in 02122, 02124, we would love your input. We have a link that's a survey asking people about your experiences in Phil's Corner that will help us really think about our work. And also we would love folks to join us to make calls to get neighbors to fill out the survey.
Excellent, thank you. And yes, I'm glad that you brought up Crossroads.
And we'll drop those survey links in the chat.
Yeah. So we have a question from Janetta Tinker, who was actually a panelist on our in our last conversation. So Janetta, I'm going to turn your microphone on so that you can ask your question live. This is a great question. I love this question. You should be good to unmute yourself, Janetta, and ask your question.
Oh. Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Oh, you can? Okay. I was just wondering that when you experienced racism, who were your the people, your mentors or friends, who got you through it, and what advice did they give you?
I can answer that. I think when I was a kid, I internalized a lot of the racism that I experienced and that my family experienced. I just thought that was kind of like I did something wrong. And it wasn't until I was in college and I had a professor who's now retired, her name is Jean Wu, who kind of became my sounding board for kind of helping me understand the Asian American experience, like outside of my own. And now, you know, I am very, very fortunate to be in community with a group of really powerful women of color, and powerful in the sense that they very much like are clear about their politics. And I think they often remind me that this is the long road. And the long road often will include moments where I feel defeated, and my community might feel defeated. But it, you know, social justice isn't going to happen overnight. And to, you know, I'm also kind of processing through a lot of things that happened when I was a kid, that, you know, I fully haven't, you know, healed from, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's such a, really great question, really tough one. I would say, you know, kind of to Jeanette's, Lisette's point about like, you know, as a kid, recognizing it, even naming it, and like even, you know, navigating ways to even deal with it, has, you know, has been challenging, and, you know, and I think, it's so tricky, because I think, I've come to terms with it, you know, kind of over the years, and over in like in community, in mentorships, and with, you know, much even reflection. I think about it in time, even like whoever, you know, the racism is coming from, is it from someone I know? Is it from a stranger? Kind of the context of it, and really kind of thinking that through, and then reflecting on my own kind of, you know, action or reaction, or even how I respond to it, whether it's in the moment or after. I think even that all of that, you know, which is a lot of emotional, mental labor that oftentimes falls on, you know, the person who is the victim or survivor, or the person, you know, in kind of that, the power dynamic, you know, and as, you know, a woman of color, kind of identifying, thinking around kind of the role of racism, you know, in our culture, in our society, in our country, and when I'm able to leave Boston or leave kind of the U.S., the experience is so, you know, can be really different, and thinking around, and I always, you know, go back to thinking around even energies these days, where I put forth that energy, and especially in thinking around, you know, investing my own energy. If it's, you know, the racism, if, you know, the prejudice is coming from someone, you know, within my community, that I feel like I want to, you know, be more invested in. My reaction and kind of how I deal with it is so much different, and oftentimes it's also still really challenging when, you know, there's someone in the Vietnamese community, when it's one of my parents' friends or so, who've like said something that in the moment I don't know how to react. That in itself is also, and that's something I'm still learning, and even through kind of the work, even thinking around how to engage, you know, our people, young people, to really, you know, call out things as they are, but in a way that also nurture kind of, you know, healing and also learning too. And all of that is really, I mean, just to say, it's, you know, a lot complicated than it is, but it's always, you know, thinking around where I want to invest my energy, and thinking around how do I kind of, am I also gaining from the situation too, learning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janetta. Do you have any advice that you got that you want to share?
It's just persistence, and, you know, I read a lot. I'm still dealing with it, and I think it's something that I'll deal with for the rest of my life. I was hopeful by the time I reached this age, this would all be in the past. My nieces and nephews used to always say that happened during your time, and times are better now. And now they're realizing that my time is their time. And so we're all dealing with it. But I would just suggest read a lot, surround yourself with the people who are positive, and get yourself the right mentors who can guide you in the right direction. And that's the best thing I can say.
Thanks, Janetta.
Thank you.
We're glad you're here. I think Kate wanted to mention something about Dorchester Art Project and talk a little bit about some of the work they're doing. And then I have another question for Tran if we don't have another participant question, but folks feel free to submit through Q&A.
Looks like one just came up. I don't
Yep.
want to take anyone else's time. Why don't we take Peter's question?
Okay.
Or is that the one you were just going to do?
No, it just takes me a second. So
Okay, well, while you're getting Peter on the line, I did want to, I noticed that Emmett's here. Sorry, Emma Levitt is here from Dorchester Art Project, and just to lift up what they're doing, and at the intersection of many, they are in Fields Corner, but a lot of other Dorchester conversations have brought up what they're doing. It was originally Howard Art Project that started around 2010. Artists Joanna Tam, Thomas Ray Willis, Georgina Lewis, Patty Chang, Sarah Pullman, Leah Craig, John Roy, Chris Ford, a lot of the SMFA group. And it's now run by Brain Arts Org. And they're doing a lot of community organizing, not just for Dorchester, but for the whole, for very much for the BIPOC community. So I want to lift them up. We'll do a chat in, drop a link to their website in the chat. And I also wanted to, we do try and bring up where is the public art in each neighborhood we visit. Besides Tran's beautiful mural, there's also Rixie Fernandez has In Our Home that she created there in 2019. And I hope there are plans for more work to come.
yeah, that's a good segue into Peter's question. And actually he let me know his audio is out, so I'm going to ask this, but
Okay.
Peter Cobb is on with us, and he has this question for Tran about your art practice. And he says, I'm struck by the range of works you've put into the community. You spoke about the live performances, and I'm curious if you could talk about your painting and about the mural, which I think Kate just referenced, and your thoughts about the complexity of creating this kind of public work and telling stories in this way. I'm just going to drop the text of this question into the chat for folks so they can see it as well. But Tran, you can see it, I think, in Q&A if you need to.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate that. I just want to give a shout out to DAP too. I also recently joined their advisory board, and definitely really appreciate the work they're doing, especially amplifying youth voices and young people. To your question, Peter, so the mural project, it was titled, a mural for the Vietnamese community at Community in Action. And it was done in 2017, actually right after I came back from Vietnam. I'd spent a year, I call it my sabbatical year in Vietnam with my family. And when I came back, I wanted to plug back in to the community, thinking around kind of the work that I wanted to be a part of. And to date, it's still I would say the biggest kind of public art project that I've been a part of. And it was funded by NIFA Creative City. And I was really engaging with Tam Le, who's the owner of Pho Hoa, long time kind of restaurant in the community, a staple. And so I was talking to him, and Tam also identifies an artist too. And he was like, oh, I was like, yeah, I want to do something. And he was like, yeah, I mean, think about what you would want to collaborate with me on. My building is here. I would love for you to consider it as a canvas. I want to do something that the community, that will bring communities together. And I was thinking a lot about, at first I was like kind of hesitant just around mural, because I feel like there's just not that there's a lot, but just like with mural, it's just like people put them on and things like that. There's a lot, we can go into a deeper conversation of even around murals and everything, but I wanted to create work that that involve community. I feel like oftentimes a lot of public art can be something where it just kind of pops up in the community and people are like, hey, where's this coming from? Who's it by? And so I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something with a message that that connected to local residents, that was inviting, that really brings about conversation and dialogue, and also can really highlight histories and narrative too. And so I given with Tam invitation, I was like, oh, this could be really a great space. My family and I at the time, I lived right down the street. My parents are still there, and so my dad always joked, he's like, if you're gonna do something, make sure it's good, because I have to see it every day. So I wanted it to to make sure that it was something that the community could really be proud of, and that they felt like they were a part of it. So my really how I went about it was really through community organizing. Trained as an organizer myself, I was thinking around ways to really approach this kind of project I brought on Kathy Lay, who's a young student at the time, high school student who's part of the community, and we literally went door to door. We went door knocking, kind of down the street, a couple street that was close to the site, and so to ask people, we made sure we made a plan to ways for people to be involved. We had we wanted to create an advisory committee to kind of always to make sure ideas and stuff are vetted, and to that is representational locally. We made sure there was a group of artists, young people who wanted to be a part of it, and also people who just wanted to kind of plug in. So we wanted to make sure that it was inclusive and accessible, and we also came up with kind of 3 themes. We wanted to kind of highlight the Vietnamese cultural narrative. We wanted to bring about kind of themes of hope and unity. So that was really kind of, we had that 3 central theme that we kept kind of throughout the project when we recruited people during kind of the art making process, and also the kind of the implementation and execution of it. So really, I would say the heart of it is really community organizing, because we want it to be something that was participatory, but that's something that people felt like they were a part of, and they can keep coming back again and again. And so it was, a project we've been, super proud of. If you could get a chance to co-visit it, you can see all the people, kind of the plaque, a little bit of the history, and all the people that were a part of it. And so really very, grassroots community effort. And to this day, people, still come up to it and stuff like that. And, really, share kind of what it means to them to have kind of like a mural that they feel like they can see themselves in.
Yeah, we talk a lot at Now and There about what it means to put artwork in a neighborhood, and how to do that in a way that feels authentic and organic and respectful of the neighborhood you're in and the people who live there. And that is like a prime example of ways to do that. We have a great question from Ryan Simmons. So I'm gonna turn your mic on, Ryan, so that you can talk. And this question, I think, is a good one for Lisette to take first, but I'm not sure that there'll be an answer. And this may be something where folks in the chat have some ideas to share, and something for us to take away from this conversation to think about. But I am gonna let you ask it live, Ryan, and see what our capacity is for answering you or giving some ideas for this. And then we have one more question after this. And then we'll
Sure.
wrap up.
Sure thing. Yeah, I think it's more of a bigger conversation around food, eating healthy, and just having community around food in Fields Corner. And there's a lot of places where it's very difficult to find fresh, healthy food. A food desert's considered anything greater than a mile, and there is definitely greater than a mile for finding food. So how can we go about solving that, creating more food solutions for, like, maybe small grocers, or even gardening, more public gardens or something like that, but just really a better solution to food in our area?
I think this is actually a question that myself and some folks who are part of the Dorchester Mutual Aid have started talking about. Food access is something that we have been really trying to figure out during COVID. And, the extension of that, has us thinking about, food policy in the state. How do we make sure that there's culturally relevant food, that there's healthy food, that there's affordable food? I think to kind of shout out, places like the Daily Table, which is on Washington Street, not right in Fields Corner, but right out of it. And Viet Aid, we are in partnership with the Dorchester Food Co-op for our next real estate project that's going to be in the Bowdoin, Geneva neighborhood on Bowdoin and Toplift for their brick and mortar grocery store, which, I think is hoping to meet the goal of healthy, accessible food to be our tenant in that building.
It would be nice to see something closer to the T too, because I believe it was ABC, the America's Food Basket or whatever. It looked like it closed down, so I don't know that there's any food grocery stores around besides the co-op.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's actually some really great Vietnamese-owned grocery stores in Phil's Corner. There's one that's called AC Farm that's right on the other side of Debenny's. And then there's like 2 or 3 Vietnamese-owned grocery stores that's a little bit down that has not just Asian vegetables, but kind of has pretty diverse fresh food options, fresh vegetables and fruit options.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would say is, I think around this idea of even food security, food sovereignty, a lot of, community members, people, of immigrant and refugee background, if people also, have their own cultural knowledge. I see a lot of families, in the Dorchester communities, Fields Corner, who grow their own food even, and, different ways, different kind of families, kind of rituals and family kind of ways that people go about eating. Of course, acknowledging that there's not, the infrastructure could be better in our community and program and offering that are coming about. But just this idea, I know Kate earlier, even starting with, the land acknowledgement of, the space that we're on, and thinking about how a lot of that has been lost over, displacement and migration. But thinking back again now, how do we make sense of, cultural knowledge that are already existing within families and community, and how do we make sure we have the resources and that people to really amplify ways that people, can go about healthy eating, access to food, and especially around this idea of food sovereignty. So there's a lot of, deep rooted stuff that's there, but, to really acknowledge some of the great work that's being done and that's, being forged, moving forward and everything.
Yeah. I will add, Viet Aid operates a small community garden that we hopefully within the next couple months is going to figure out what the new identity is going to be for the garden, and how do we use it to kind of maximize food production.
Yeah, it'd be great to see a lot more little gardens. There's a plot on Robinson that Fields Corner, I forget the name of the organization, owns, and they've just been sitting on it. And it used to be an old school, and it's just a vacant lot that has, derelict things going on in there. And it would be beautiful to see things like that turned into a garden. So I love the idea of more gardening.
Thanks, Ryan. We are technically now over time, and one of the things that we want to do is honor people's time and their commitment to this conversation. So I have one last question that I'm going to ask for a quick answer, like one thing. And Jackie, I'm going to ask this question. I would love to have your voice as part of the conversation, but I'm going to ask it because it came up earlier in the chat. And there was a question from Karen Krolak that we couldn't get to, but we are going to follow up with you, Karen. So the question is, just for the folks on the line, for folks on the call who are interested in visiting Fields Corner, who might not be residents of the neighborhood, what is something in your opinion that they shouldn't miss? So just one thing from each of you, Tran and Lisette, and then I'll throw it to Kate to wrap it up.
I can go because I don't know if she'll say it, but you should definitely check out Tran's mural. That I think is at the intersection of Dot and Leedsville. Is that Leedsville?
Oh, you mean Orchardfield?
Orchardfield. Yeah. Go check out her mural.
I appreciate that shout out, Lisette. I saw the question early and I was actually kind of reflecting on it. I'm like, it's so tricky. Definitely, like, support local business, support, organization like Viet Aid, but, if you can, don't just go once, keep coming back again and again. I think Dorchester and Fields Corner is an amazing community. There's so much history and ties here. Don't just come once, and really think about your own relationship, to Dorchester, about your own community, thinking about ways that you can, truly support the community and not just with a one-time visit.
Thanks.
Well, I am struck by the depth of this conversation, and Lisette and Tran, I appreciate all that you're doing, from organizing, from listening, from reflecting back. We talked earlier about, like, I did ask you, and we can't get to this question now, like, how are you taking care of yourself? But what I heard throughout this call is it is the long road. whether that is figuring out our artistic practice and how that comes together with our activism, whether that's healing, whether that's allyship with the BIPOC communities. It's going to take some time. And so I appreciate you both for helping us, reminding us that it is going to take a long time and that we can't do this without each other. I'd just like to wrap by thanking NIFA's Fund for the Arts and the Boston Foundation for their ongoing support of Now and There and their generosity helping us produce this series. With their support, we can make these recordings available online with closed captioning and pay each participant a living wage. Thank you all for joining us today, for your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. If you have a few more minutes, we'd love your feedback on this session and what we're doing with Now and There Asks in general. And we hope you'll join us next week, Thursday, July 23rd. I'll be back in Boston. We will be looking at Alston. Sorry, and what does Alston need right now? We'll have special guest, local artist Ross Miller, who's been doing fabulous work in the city for decades. And from Alston Village Main Streets, Alex Cornicini. And perhaps another special guest we're still working on to talk about the neighborhood of Alston. So we'll drop that registration link in the chat box. I thank all of you for being here today. If this is a long road, we need vacations and times off. So I'm going to sign off from my little vacation and thank all of you for being here together with us and hope to see you again next week. Take care.